DNF Podcast. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Click on that bell for notifications. And if you are listening to us on Spotify, which the entire back catalog of Spotify is now uploaded, give us a follow. That would be greatly appreciated. All right. On the 26th of January at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Kelly's Sisterhood from the Sisterhood Zine. On the the 2nd of February at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we got Rebecca Lord, the hardcore cheerleader. On the 16th of February at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we've got CJ Klemanski from Death Threat and One Life Crew. And Raghunath Das, that's going to be on the 9th of March at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. He's been in Shelter, Youth of Today, and Better Than 1,000. And just added, we don't have a date for it yet, but Frank Three Gun Novinek from Hatebreed and Terror, Ringworm, and Integrity. And as you can see at the bottom here, we've got an official merchandising company, Hell's Heart Merch Co. Go to hellsheartco.bigcartel.com. Use the code 20 for 20% off your entire order. Throw up some samples here later. They're printed on Bella Canvas Tri-Blend, 50% polyester, 25% cotton, 25% rayon. You'll love them. They feel like a dream. All right, my next guest today, he's a very funny stand-up comedian out in Los Angeles. He's also the host of the Anti-Woke podcast, of which I had the privilege of being a guest on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael Regilio. What's going on, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. The podcast is Dogma Debate.
Excuse me. I was the anti-woke one. Excuse me.
Yeah. But I've been accused of being anti-woke from time to time, but I've also been accused of being so woke it's ridiculous. It depends on who's listening. I think that's a good place to be. You want half the people calling you woke and the other people calling you anti-woke. So
I think based on our conversations, you did have a lot of kind of centrist moderate views. So I think that was, that surprised me actually. So
yeah, that comes with age. I'll tell you, man. I was started in the Young Republicans in high school. Always political, and I ended up basically a Bernie bro, which I know you were as well, and so somewhere in between is so I've done the whole panoply,
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, like you said, it kind of comes with age, and everybody has different experiences. Everybody learns different things. But my question for you, we were talking a little bit earlier about the fires, and what dude, like everybody is being affected by this. Everybody's being displaced. You mentioned yourself that you were you've had to kind of relocate and go someplace else. Like, what's going on right now?
Well, actually, right now as we speak, there's a new one. We got a new fire burning up the 5 in an area we call the Grapevine, which is a beautiful stretch of mountainous highway north of Los Angeles. Apparently, that's on fire. But yeah, I was not affected by fire, so to speak. I was affected by smoke. I tried to tough it out. I wanted to tough it out. I could see the fires burning from the roof of my house in 3 directions. I was like, wow, which is good. It informs you of which direction to run when it's time to go. I'm like, I see fire in the north, the south, and the west. Guess I'm going east when the time comes. But I really didn't want to go, but it was that blanket of ash and that smoke that settled over my community. And I woke up and I'm still feeling it. I still feel it in my lungs to this moment. And I've been wearing the N95 mask out in public and, outside of buildings that have air purifiers on for a week now. But yeah, I woke up, I guess it was Thursday morning, and I just felt like death, man. And it started to occur to me, and I've heard it said since, but I hadn't heard it before that. I was like, this is not oak trees I'm breathing in. This is plasma screen TVs. This is Teslas that burned up in the night. This is drywall. This is plumbing. This is PV pipes. This is whatever, cappuccino makers. Whatever is burning up in these fires is what I'm breathing in. And that's not normal particulate matter that you want in your lungs. Like, I can handle, like I said, wood fires. We've all been to the Boy Scouts or whatnot and breathed in that fire, and it's it's not great for you, I'm sure, but we can handle it. But this was something else, and it felt like something else. Yeah,
dude. I mean, I can only imagine, and David Lynch, he just passed away,
Yeah,
rest in peace. And I can't help but think that, because he had emphysema, he was a heavy smoker. I can't help but think that the conditions could have possibly exacerbated what he was dealing with his health.
I would think so because, like I said, maybe it's a coincidence that I just happened to catch a little something at that exact time, but I don't think so. Like it was in my lungs, it was in my eyes. Like just I haven't felt great since. There's something to it, man. And they say that it's not just, we for until today we didn't have any smoke. The smoke had pretty much cleared up, but it's the ash that's on the ground, and every car that drives down the street, every person that walks down the sidewalk, every that kicks it up, and now you're breathing in that ash, which is, it's a toxic ash, and it's kind of
Yeah.
everywhere. And according to the a city council meeting they had the other night, it's going to be about 2 years before it's, we're free and clear of it. They said wait for the first big rain and it should be okay to, you can take the mask off, but it's going to be about 2 years before, this particulate matter and these toxins are out of not just the air, but they said like the shower water, not just your drinking water, but like, the toilet water, the shower water, it's in everything, because it falls on the reservoirs, the ash falls into everything,
Right.
I went to a friend's house the other day. He had a hot tub, and he was like, "You want to get in the hot tub?" And hey, who doesn't want to get in a hot tub? And I looked at and I could see a little ash that had accumulated overnight on the water. I was like, "No, I don't want to soak in that water, man. Like
Yeah.
it's weird. It's a weird time to be in LA."
Do you have any friends that were like personally like affected by the fires that had any like property
Yep,
destroyed or
yep,
anything? Oh,
yep. I know people who lost everything, absolutely
wow.
everything.
And like I guess we can kind of get into that, like as far as like, I understand a lot of the insurance companies
Yeah,
decided to sever ties with a lot of people out there, and that's the real sad thing is that, a lot of these people, they're going to lose everything and then they're not going to have anything to gain from it, and so,
right.
what do you think as far as like this current administration's like handling of the whole situation?
Well, I mean, like anything, there's so much information out there, and this is just the age we live in, where you have to fact check, you have to find out as much of what you're hearing. I mean, and unfortunately, everything is politicized. So if you turn on one news network, they're going to tell you that Gavin Newsom and Nancy Pelosi set the fires intentionally, and you turn on another news station. As far as I mean, let's get into the insurance for just 1 second, because I think that is indicative of something that's coming, which is climate change is going to make it so that these insurance companies can't do flood insurance and can't do fire insurance. It's not going to be profitable for them to, like, how many thousands of homes burn down. Like the way that the insurance company, fire insurance in particular, works, they assume that your house burned down because a toaster oven malfunctioned, and they take care of one house at a time. They're not set up to do 20,000 homes at a time. Same with the flood insurance, I mean, as the hurricanes are going to keep hitting, and it's just, they're going to have to figure something else out, because it's just not going to be profitable for them to insure homes in a world where thousands and thousands are damaged or destroyed in any given weather event.
Right.
Right. As
Yeah.
far as Karen Bass goes, she's done. Uh, for better or for worse, I'm not entirely sure, but perception is reality, and the perception of her, Karen Bass, in case anyone's unaware, is the mayor of Los Angeles, California, and she was on a taxpayer-funded trip to Ghana in Africa, and we were all aware of what was happening. I mean, for I don't know, 4 or 5 days, that's all we heard was this is going to be a major wind event. It's going to be incredibly dry wind. This is a super red flag. It was like beyond red flag. It was called like a PSA or something, or PDA, particularly dangerous activity or something. And they were saying, get ready. This could be really, really bad. And she chose to go to Africa anyway, and then didn't choose to come rushing back immediately. It took her a day or two to get back. That seems like the end of her political career to me.
Did they advise her not to go?
I couldn't be sure if she was advised not to go or not, but I mean, every politician will tell you the buck stops here, and so blaming advisors is a bad look. You have to
Right.
you have to stand and say that this is my deal and I did this. And plus, she didn't want to answer questions about this, at the time, which is another bad look. It seems to me like, politically speaking, she's not going to fare well through this one.
Well, I just thought it was pretty telling that, she's sitting there, casting a lot of the blame on, the fire chief. And it's like, well, how are you supposed to fight these fires if they don't have the resources to do their jobs? Like I was like, I don't really think they're to blame for all of this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the cut to the budget wasn't a giant one. It sounds giant to an average citizen, but when you look at the budget of the city and the county of Los Angeles, it was a rather small cut to the fire department's budget, but it was stupid. And I mean, one thing has to pay for another. We're dealing with crisis after crisis after crisis, and some of them are related.
Yeah.
Some of them are not related, but the homeless crisis in Los Angeles was the last crisis that we were dealing with. And on the books, I think it turned out to be about $1 billion that we taxpayers gave the city to do something about the homeless crisis, which they did. To from one perception, they did something, which was basically they bought up all these hotels and they took Skid Row and they moved it indoors, out of sight, out of mind. I happen to have a friend who works for City Hall and he monitors these very facilities. And he said, it is just that. It's Skid Row indoors. You go in and it's trash, human feces in the hallways, mentally ill
God.
people. It's as disgusting as you can imagine. And all we did was we got it off the streets where people didn't have to look
Right.
at it anymore. But it was to the tune of $1 billion. Now, there is a homeless crisis in not just Los Angeles, but in a lot of other cities in America on the West Coast, and in warmer climates, we get it worse than anybody else, because if you were going to be homeless, where would you want to be homeless? I'd want to be where
Exactly.
there's no winter. So obviously people come here to be homeless, or, uh, people last longer here as a homeless person. So I think just buying up old hotels and putting people in rooms and just saying, there's a mental health crisis. There's a number of crises where, once again, we're treating the symptoms and not the disease. So yeah.
Are any of your friends that maybe weren't directly affected, or even ones that were directly affected, do they have any aspirations to leave California or leave Los Angeles as a result of this?
Not at the moment, but we haven't seen what's going to happen yet. The housing crisis is about to come. Maybe you guys have heard, maybe you haven't, but I mean, people are monitoring rents on homes and apartments and homes for sale, and we're watching prices go up 100, 200, 300% in some cases. So the greedy are going to gouge. And the fact of the matter is, with the number of people that lost their homes, there's just not enough homes for them to move into,
Right.
and these are families with kids. They can't move 10 towns away. They can't move to the Central Valley. They want to stay in Los Angeles. Their kids go to school in Los Angeles. Their job is in Los Angeles. So the fact of the matter is, we're still dealing with the crisis, and we're not dealing with the aftermath so much yet. So we don't really know,
Right.
but it's going to be a housing crisis like this city has not seen in a long time. I remember when I moved to Los Angeles in 1997, I had a bunch of friends that moved to San Francisco, which had an under 1% vacancy at that time. And that's because San Francisco was so hot. The tech bubble and, Silicon Valley and all that stuff had exploded the city to the point where everyone wanted to live there. And there was nowhere to live. You couldn't get an apartment. You couldn't get a home.
Right.
I think we're going to see something similar in LA in the coming months and possibly years.
Yeah, man, this whole situation is just like, it's heartbreaking. It's fucked up. It's like it's all over the place. And I'm just watching from afar, and I'm like, man, I have no idea what's gonna happen, or what everybody's gonna do after this. But I'm praying for the best. I have a lot of friends that are still there, and that are, being displaced and whatnot. And I
Yeah.
truly hope that it gets better.
Yeah, and you and me, the people that we know, because we come from the LA comedy scene, we're not hanging out with the super rich people of the Palisades. God bless them. they have my sympathies, obviously, but it is the people on the margins that are going to be pushed out first. So, we're going to
Right.
see. I knew people that were already on the margins and living in their cars, or some people that were just getting Airbnbs when they could, living in the cars when they could. What are they going to do, man? I mean, the
Right.
Airbnbs are gone. Every family that lost a home in the Palisades is moving into those Airbnbs right now. So the
Yep.
person that would get one every couple of weeks just to have a place to live for a few nights, they're not going to be able to have those.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's you typically I have a lot of guests that are on here that are musicians, and I spoke to you on your show, and you have a background in hardcore and punk rock, like of
Right.
your, like a
Yeah.
lot of the, kind of the older bands and whatnot. And so, like, my question is, how did you get exposed to that? And I don't know if I asked you this or not, but do you play any instruments
I do. I went to
or
Berklee College of Music, actually. I studied
oh,
guitar. Yeah.
okay.
I've played in bands. I still play in bands, but I've been playing in bands since I was 16 years old, 17 maybe, I think. But yeah, well, for as far as my sort of punk bona fides go, I come from a town called Marblehead, Massachusetts, and Marblehead, Massachusetts was a very unique town in that we fucking loved the Descendents so goddamn much that they would tour. They would play Boston the night before, and then they would come play just for us kids in Marblehead. And I mean,
Wow.
when you're 15 years old, I mean, the first time I saw them, they were already all. I predated or I post dated the Descendants, and then predated them getting back together, of course. But
Right.
but yeah, so I mean, when you're 15, 16 years old and you're told that this punk band from California is coming to play our middle school, they literally played the middle school on a Saturday afternoon, man.
Whoa.
And I mean,
Whoa.
it fills you not just with admiration for the band that they would do this for you, but just, I mean, it was so freaking cool. And
Yeah.
so, my first real punk show, I was 15, was at my middle school, and it was all. And my first band was playing Descendant songs and playing all songs. And we told Scott Reynolds, who was the singer at the time, that we sing one of your songs. It was called "She's My Ex." I think it's off of a record called All Roy's Revenge.
Yeah.
And he brought he brought my lead singer on stage, and he did "She's My Ex" with all. you
Oh,
know
wow.
and this dude did not grow up to be a musician. He grew up to be a
Oh,
computer animator, and he has told me many times that his life peaked at 15 years old on stage at
oh
the
no.
middle school with Steven Egerton, Carl Alvarez, and Bill Stevenson backing him up as he fucking sang "She's My Ex," man. It was a
That's
beautiful
cool.
moment. Yeah, I mean, we were crazy for the Descendants. I mean, my thing was I was really into the Sex Pistols, which I didn't care that the skate punks and the other hardcore kids didn't think they were cool. When I went to school, I started high school in 1986. It was more of a down and dirty kind of punk rock scene, and the Pistols were on a major label, and Sid Vicious was kind of seen as a fool or whatnot. But I would listen to their records, and I thought, particularly Never Mind the Bollocks, but I mean, I had everything, and people don't know this. For a band that technically had one release, you could buy like 30 Sex Pistols records. I mean, there's the
Yeah.
B-sides and the live recordings and the just them on a talk show. Like, they were so big, and they released so little that everyone was looking for a way to make money off the Sex Pistols. So you could buy on vinyl the Sex Pistols on the William or John Grundy show, William Grundy, whatever the big talk show they went on the BBC, where they swore and and were banned from the BBC forever. But I mean, everything they had. And I will say that as an adult, I go back and I listen. I'm like, no, I was right. Those guys were fucking cool, man. They were super cool. Johnny Rotten was cool. Steve Jones was a great guitar player, cool licks. Glenn Matlock, who wrote the songs, was the original bass player. It turns out Steve Jones actually played bass on Nevermind the Bollocks. Sid Vicious never played a damn note. I mean, not even
Oh, he was
live.
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, live they had a dude behind a curtain.
Yeah, I've heard
Because if
that
you listen
before.
to the Sex Pistols live records, everyone was like, Sid sucked. And then I'd listen, I was like, he sounds pretty good to me. And then it turns out that wasn't him. That was a dude behind a curtain playing the bass.
Have you ever seen I've seen a video, and it's of Courtney Love, and they're playing like Celebrity Skin, and what's being played on the soundboard is not what you hear
No
actually
way.
live.
Wow.
And she was god awful. Like,
Oh,
was just terrible. Like, her backing band was just, carrying all the weight.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to send that to you because it was
You might
like,
not have to because I think I know what you're talking about. I think it was at a festival called CMJ a bunch of years ago in New York City,
maybe.
and they played. And I'm just such a music nerd. I read all the articles and whatnot. And the sound guy, which you got to pay the sound guy or he will fuck you. Like, I guess they decided not to pay him or something like that. So he took the off the board recording of her playing guitar, and it is
It's
one
awful.
of the worst things you've ever heard. I mean,
It's
on my
terrible.
first day of playing guitar, I could have done a little bit better than
I
her
think
in her
anyone could.
30th year. Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy to me. It's like, is she always this bad, or is just her backup musicians just a front for her inability to play?
I mean, this was the whole thing about rock and roll in some ways, though. It was an image. She was never a talent. She was a face. She was an
Right.
attitude, that a major label capitalized off of. Now, everybody says Kurt Cobain wrote Live Through This. She's never admitted it, but it's very strange that the follow-up record, she hired like Billy Corgan and a bunch of other people to help her write songs. It's like, if you wrote that first record, which had cool songs on it, why did you have to hire all these guys to help you on the second record? I don't know.
Yeah.
She used to come into the restaurant I managed, and this is just me being totally honest, and I don't mean to disparage people for their looks or whatnot. But in her case, she did it to herself. But the first time she came in, I'm not kidding you when I say, "Oh my God, there's a burn victim." That's like some. Then I was like, "Oh no, that's Courtney Love." I mean, like, you can't. It's like Mickey Rourke getting the plastic surgery and then going into boxing. Like, you can't
Yeah.
mess. Like, whatever she did post plastic surgery, like she didn't
It's
do the
terrible.
upkeep, and it looks kind of like her face is melted. I mean, it looks wild. Like, I don't know. Plastic
That's the
surgery on its best day, plastic surgery just makes you look like you've had plastic surgery. It never
Yeah.
looks, it never looks great, but like, there's some upkeep that she failed to do, I think.
Yeah, I think once, what's her name? Courtney Love, or not Courtney Love, Courtney Cox. She did it like gradually, and she looked okay, but now she just looks like a space alien, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Don't do it. Don't do it. And the thing
Yeah,
about that for me, I always say, is like, unnatural is the least attractive thing you can look like. Weird, or like, even if you had a big nose and you found it unattractive, and you get some weird plastic surgery nose and it's smaller now, and you think that proportionately it looks nicer on your face, if it looks strange, like, that's the one thing human beings are so good at. I mean, you ever heard of the uncanny valley? Do you know what
Uncanny
that is?
Valley. I was about to say that. Yeah,
It's uncanny valley. That's what plastic surgery is. And I mean, uncanny valley, I think they've maybe gotten beyond that with CG to some degree. I'm not entirely sure, but
yeah,
they haven't gotten past that with plastic surgery yet. Like, it's
right.
still uncanny valley, and you look like you double take these people, and I don't care who it is, how rich, how famous, how the best plastic surgery in the world, and it's always like, it's just like me. I'm gaining weight as I get older. I've got a little bald patch in the back of my head, but I can line it up in the mirror where it looks fine to me, because I don't get
Sure.
myself from all these other angles. And you see a picture of
Right.
yourself, you're like, Jesus Christ, is that what I look like
Yeah.
from other angles? What the fuck do I
Yeah.
care? I never see myself from other angles. I see myself just looking in the mirror in the morning, and then at night when I'm brushing my teeth. That's all I have to deal with. As long as that looks okay,
Exactly.
I'm cool with it. But yeah,
Well,
maybe it's like that. When they look in the mirror and they hold their face just right, it looks perfect to them. But it's that angle, that weird angle where you're like, no, something's up there.
something's off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Back to what you were saying about, the Descendants playing. I had a similar experience in that when I was in high school, like, my dad used to drive a tour bus for bands, and you remember the group, the Prodigy, right? The
Of
electronic
course.
group.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that guitar player Giz, he had a almost like a power punk side project called Janus Stark, and they had an off day whenever my dad was driving them. Well, they had a few off days actually. They came and stayed with us for a while, and
Wow.
they my dad hooked it up so that they were able to play at our high school. And it was like, it was epic, man, because it was like, here is this crazy like English band with like, bleached hair and just, tattoos and stuff like that, and they're playing for all these like, you know country podunk like kids, but the kids loved it, they were so into it, and so how did the Descendants get hooked up at your middle school? Did one of the teachers or the administrators hook it up?
No, well, it was some older kids that I'm not really sure how it worked, but there were these older kids that had contacted them years earlier, and they were poor. They didn't have a lot of money. So, and these were my hometown is a rich town. My family was not rich. We put 6 kids into a 3-bedroom house. To
Jesus.
be clear about just how crowded it was, but my parents wanted to live there because of the school system and how good it was. But so these were rich kids, skate punks and whatnot. And so I think they were just saying to the Descendants, like, hey, when you come through Boston, you can crash at our place. We have a swimming pool, we've got a sauna, we got a hot tub, we have beachfront property. And they were like, fuck yeah. So they'd been coming for years. So the first time I saw them at the middle school was like the 6th time they had played my hometown. And I will say, speaking to what you just said, like when you hit people in those nostalgic years of youth, it sticks with you forever. Every single person at those fucking shows still loves the fucking Descendants, man, myself
Yeah.
included, man. I mean, I can't get enough of them. I know everything about them. In fact, I was playing one of the bands I was in 2 bands with a guy by the name of Steve McDonald, who was the bass player for Red Cross. I was both he both played with a band that I was in, and then I ended up playing in the Stephen McDonald group. We put out one record, and we would tour. And I remember him saying to me, like at one point, he's like, "Dude, stop asking me about the Descendants. Like, I'm tired of talking." Because I would be like, "So in the early days when you guys were playing with the Descendants," he was like, "Those were just dudes I knew. Like, stop worshiping them so much." I'm like, I can't. It's not possible for me to not worship them so much.
I hear you, man. No, I mean, yeah, definitely. Like, I was already like a huge fan of Prodigy, and then my dad was asking me, he's like, "Hey, have you ever heard of Prodigy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "One of the guys, one of the bands that I'm touring, one of the guys plays in the band." And I was like, "Holy fucking shit!" I was like, "Really?" And he used to play in this old band called English Dogs, which they were like a street. You may have heard of them. They're like a street like
Yeah.
English like punk band, and I actually got to see them down in Long Beach, and it was great because he remembered me from like years earlier. And like I said, he stayed here and actually got to be a guest on this podcast, which if you're watching this podcast, go and check it out. It's my episode with Giz Butt. But yeah, the kids still like that I went to high school with still like ask me about that, and they're like, "Oh, that was really cool." And it's just, you're at such a time when you're a formative time in your life where you remember those things. And yeah, sometimes those guys get a little bit overwhelmed by that. Like, I get questions about my first band a lot, and I didn't really like my first band. Like, we just kind of did it, and but a lot of people really seemed to like it, and I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's funny you should say that, because as I was just thinking that I just saw, I think it might have been Instagram or TikTok or something, like somebody went to a punk show and was asking everybody like what band got you into punk. And I was surprised that somebody said Generation X, because that was one of the bands. It was not their full catalog. Do you know who they are?
I know who Project X is. The
Generation
straight
X
edge
was
hardcore
Billy
band.
Idol's band. Old
Okay.
band. And they had one
Oh,
cool punk record just called Generation X, man. And yeah, I was really into those guys as well, man. Like the British thing was huge for me. Like the American thing, like it was the Descendants. I like Black Flag a lot, but not like too much else. Like a lot of friends listen to Circle Jerks, and I've become friends with Keith Morris over the years. We've talked about that and whatnot, but they weren't really on my radar as much as like the British stuff, like the Clash, particularly early Clash, Generation X, Sex Pistols. Like those were the bands when I was 15 and 16 that I also was incredibly into British girls. Like the accent was, so I wanted to be British. I was an Anglophile of the highest order. I even did a student exchange in England,
oh
like,
wow.
yeah, we were able to go on student exchanges. Everyone went to Germany or France because they wanted to submerge themselves in a foreign language. I went to England and I learned nothing whatsoever. I learned no language. But I was like, I
Well,
was
if you're
looking
into
for,
British girls, that makes
yeah.
it easy
Oh,
for you,
dude,
right?
it was amazing. I wasn't looking for an education. I was looking for a wife. Like I was 16 years old. I was like, I am going to marry one of these girls and get citizenship. I always wanted to be British. I loved the British punk scene. I loved the culture. I mean, everything British, super Anglophile. Monty Python was the other huge thing for me in high school. I mean, massive.
Yeah.
Not just the show, the records, the vinyl, like everything they ever did. Monty Python Live at the Hollywood Bowl, all of it. I mean, every word memorized. My mother used to say, how can you memorize every word of these Monty Python shows and not be able to memorize one word for school? Like I couldn't memorize a single algebra equation, still couldn't tell you anything. I mean, I almost successfully avoided going to high school. Like I ditched so close to every class. I had a system.
Wow.
Yeah. That I didn't get caught until senior year. But
Wow.
they would take attendance first thing in the morning and then go hang it on the door. And then somebody from the main office would go around and collect all the attendance and then notate who was there or who wasn't there. It didn't take a genius to figure out all you have to do is hide in the bathroom until like 20 minutes into the school day when they come and hang it on the door, and then sneak to your first door class, your classroom or your first door, the door for your first classroom, and change yourself from absent to present, and then take the day off. They caught me last 2 months of senior year.
Oh.
I snuck up to the door. I marked myself present. I turned around and the entire administration was standing behind me. It was a
Oh.
sting. They had been waiting to
Oh.
catch me. They were all standing there. They were like, got you. And I was like, got me.
Was
I
this
gotta,
something so this was something a lot of the other students do that they just
no,
caught
I did
on
not
to?
give that secret away. I wasn't going to spoil it.
No, but I mean, how did they get clued into it
I'm
that
not sure how they
you
got clued into it, but they got clued into it and they caught me. But
Wow.
yeah. And by the way, the only person who paid the price for this was me. I definitely would have been better to have gone to school and gotten an education than to be, I feel like I've given myself something of an education since high school. Like I've worked hard, I've read a lot of books, but there's blind spots. Like I said, algebra, I don't know what the hell. I doubt I could even spell it, much less do it. But the things that I found interesting, science, history, stuff like that, I feel like I've definitely filled in the gaps. I have a pretty good knowledge of this stuff now. I find it fascinating. I've educated myself, but all the stuff that you have to do, but you don't want to do, never got around to it. So yeah, I'm half educated.
I'm with you, man. I was just talking today about going to teach English in like another country, and I don't even know if I even got remotely close to an associate's degree, but I guess that's like a prerequisite or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, school's not like. I mean, I feel like I could do school, but I just don't give a fuck, So it's one of those things. But back to what you were saying about Monty Python. I think it would probably be safe to say that it's easy for you to remember is because they just had such impeccable wit and like timing, and they were so like really good at like the theater of the absurd, like just making everything just so like you know yeah, Flying Circus was hilarious to me.
Yeah.
There was a sketch where they were talking about this guy who was a runner or something, and they said for lunch Ken goes to the side of the road and rubs gravel into his head, and that always stuck with me. I was like, that's fucking
Oh my God. When
hilarious.
you're a 15-year-old boy, forget about it. But I had noticed, like, as an adult now that I do comedy, that it seems to me that the smarter you are, the silly you are. It's like, I'm a big fan of Steve Martin. His comedy, very silly. Steve Martin, the man, very smart. Monty Python, super smart. The comedy, super silly. There's some correlation between smart and silly. And that these dudes that come out, looking for clapter, what we call it in the business, which is, instead of laughter, you just get a bunch of people going, yeah, bravo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like you
Hannah
talk to them.
Gatsby.
Huh?
Hannah Gatsby.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, whoever it is, if you're up there pontificating about the deepest things in the world, unless you're George Carlin, chances are you're projecting or you're trying to make up for something, some inadequacy that you think you have. And these
Right.
guys that completely are smart and they could pontificate on 1,000,001 subjects, they go pure silly, but it's the subtext within the silly where the smart is there, but it's beneath the surface.
Yeah.
The surface smart stuff, that's the guy that wants everyone to go, how smart is that person, you know? It's when you
Yeah.
bury the smart under the silly and you have to hear it in the subtext. That's when it's really smart. It's double smart. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, how did that? How did you kind of get like segged into comedy? Was that something that you? Um, I guess there's a lot of musicians that do comedy, and was that something that you immediately embarked upon when you were in L.A. or
Not at
no?
all, man. Not at all. I came here to be, a musician. I still am a musician. I worked incredibly hard at music, but it was around 40 years of age that a friend of mine said to me for my birthday, they bought me stand-up comedy classes. Another thing you shouldn't admit to if you are a cool guy, but I'm not a cool guy, so I admit I took stand-up comedy classes. And I told him, not interested. Get your money back. And he was like, I can't get my money back. It's already paid for. You're going. I was like, dude, I appreciate it. He was like, dude, you're funny. You always crack me up. I've always thought you'd be good at this. It's a fun class. Just take the class. So I begrudgingly went to a class. And, in the first class, it was a 3-hour class. And at the end, you had to write and perform 1 minute of comedy. And it wasn't until I got on stage and did my first 1 minute, I was like, I'm over this. I'm not into it. Did that 1 minute of comedy, got 3 laughs in a minute, and I was fucking hooked. And I realized, oh, I'm not a musician. I mean, this is me talking. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. You can judge me as you will, but I was like, I'm a creative person, and I just like scratching that creative itch, and I could scratch it from 30 different angles. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
where. Like I got the same creative satisfaction of creating something. I've been lucky enough to have had a musical idea come to me in the middle of the night, and then some 8 months later hear it coming out of the radio, being played on K-Rock, and go, that started in my head. Now it's coming off the freaking radio. It's being broadcast. And the idea of coming up
That's
with a
like that's like the dude from that shot Dimebag Daryl. He thought they were stealing ideas for
no
Pantera.
way. I
Yeah,
did not know
yeah,
that.
yeah. He was schizophrenic, and he thought that Daryl and Vinny were lifting ideas from thoughts that he had.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it's
had
fucked
already
up.
heard that he was like mad that they broke up the band because it was at Dimebag Darrell's other band. It was his post Pantera project that he
I
shot him.
think that may have been part of it. Yeah,
Yeah. But he
yeah,
thought they were
yeah.
stealing his ideas. I mean, you hear that from, I've been around long enough, and unfortunately, mental illness and artistry do kind of go together. And I have had friends and known acquaintances that kind of were dealing with borderline personality disorder or things like that. And I have definitely had people tell me that, so and so stole my song before. And you're like, dude, Jimi Hendrix could not have stolen your song because you were born 8 years after he died. So,
Wow.
but you can't say that to an irrational person. They don't understand,
Sure,
No,
sure.
he
Yeah.
was a time traveler. That was the thing about Hendrix, man, is that he was untied. He was unburdened by the constraints of time. And he came into my room last night and he stole the song and he went back in time and he played it. It's like, dude, you did not write Spanish Castle Magic, I assure you.
Well, I'll tell you what. Don't ever go and write Star Trek shit at the cafe next to the Paramount lot, because I don't know, man. Like I went in there one time because me and my buddy were writing a pilot for a Star Trek series that we wanted to pitch, and we had done this over the course of a few weeks. And I remember I was walking up to go get some more coffee, and right when I was in earshot, some guy, like he was in mid sentence, said Star Trek really loud like that, and I was like, I don't
Whoa.
know. Maybe I was reading into it too, and they were like executive types too, and I was just like, and then one of the ships that we named after, like we called it our pilot series. We named it after the ship, as they do with many of the Star Trek episodes or series, and the name of the ship that we used ended up in Star Trek Picard. And I told
No
my
way.
buddy this. I was like, look at this. I was like, look. And he was like, what the fuck? And I was like, I don't
Hey,
think we
man,
should have been
that sounds
hanging out around the
possible.
parallel.
I mean, if these guys were creative geniuses, they wouldn't be executives, they would be,
Right.
because they want to be creative. They tried to be a writer and they failed, and that's how they ended up as an executive. So the only chance they have at a good idea is to steal it. Without naming names, because I'm not going to slander some of the biggest names in Hollywood, I will tell you that I had a landlord who I loved with all my heart and soul. His name was Vero, and he was a crazy old kook. And I'm not rich, so my apartment building is not a nice building, and he wasn't a rich man either, but he'd been around forever. He's passed on now. And he would tell me the coolest stories. He came out to LA in the early 60s, and he was just such a lover of art. Well, at his funeral, his friends came to me, or I was talking to his old friends, and they were saying that he had this idea for a movie in like the early 70s, and he had a meeting with a major film production company, and they passed. And then like a year later, a huge movie came out that we all know the name of, that you would know it if I said it to you. And
Maybe you
they
could
were
tell
like, it
me
is
after the show.
exactly his movie, and it destroyed him. And it affected him in such a way that I don't think he pursued the career anymore, but
That happens more often than not. You know that for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I've certainly heard about it. But yeah, I mean, that's why nowadays, I just had a guy the other day say to me that would I take a look at his screenplay, I said, sure. And he's like, okay, I'm going to send you an NDA. And in one sense, I'm like, dude, I'm not going to steal your screenplay. But in another sense, I'm like, I get it. Okay. Send the NDA. I'll take a look at it,
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy, man. I mean, and I'm probably giving myself way too much credit, and it could, sometimes just stuff goes out there in the ether and people pick up on it. And, you may think that you were plagiarized or whatever, but, sometimes people just, have the same idea, but who knows,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in comedy, that's a big thing, and I let it roll off my back all the time because I'm a joke writer. A lot of people are storytellers. I'm a storyteller too, but, I like to write jokes. I love the formula of writing jokes. And if you write a joke, like a joke, there's no way somebody else hasn't thought of it somewhere out there, and I've done Kill Tony a few times. It's a big podcast. Every time I do it, I get 20 emails from some dude, like some guy in Atlanta. He's like, dude, I have the same joke. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to tell you, dude. I looked you up. I can't find you anywhere. You have no clips posted anywhere. If you're saying I was in Atlanta at an open mic somewhere and I stole your joke, I can assure you that never happened. What I always say to them is I say, look, I didn't steal your joke. I don't know what this, it's just, if it's some play on words, like, dude, anyone could have thought of it. This word could mean this as well. And so you make that joke or something. I say, hey, first one to tell it on late night TV gets the joke, and they're like, okay, I like that. That sounds fun. But I've also had friends that told a personal story about themselves and had someone else get on stage a week later and tell the same story. And they're like, wait a second. It's impossible that also happened to you. Like,
Right.
you stole it, man. You fucking stole it. It's a business.
Have you ever witnessed it in real time? Like you're sitting in the audience or you're, getting ready to go on and, somebody says a joke and you're like, so-and-so told that exact same joke.
That has absolutely happened to me. But at the same time, I think to myself, who maybe my friend or maybe the person I know, maybe they stole it from them, or maybe it wasn't stolen at all, or maybe it's just a coincidence that two people, like, comedy has never been more popular, as I'm sure you know. I say that without knowing it for fact, but I find it hard to believe that 40 years ago or 30 years ago, there were 300 open mics a day in Los Angeles and all of them were packed. But that's what it's like now. So with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people writing jokes all day, every day, the chances of somebody stumbling across a similar concept as you are, in fact, I have a friend who I was lucky enough, I signed a deal and taped my first special this year, hopefully coming out soon. See what happens. Awesome. But one of the other comics that I filmed with, he was telling me he's got a bit about the fact that Auschwitz has a Yelp page. There's a Yelp page for Auschwitz, and he does a bit about that. And he told me that, he posted the clip online, and like several comics came at him and were like, I have the same exact bit. He's like, yeah,
Wow.
it's absurd. Auschwitz has a Yelp bit. That'd be weird if a bunch of comics didn't all say something about that,
Did you know Chernobyl has like guided tours?
No
Did you
way.
know that?
I,
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if it's even like a joke or something, but I looked it up and I was like, I wonder if people can actually go into Chernobyl now. And I guess they might have like guided tours. I don't know if you have to wear like a hazmat suit or something like
right.
that, but
Well, it's the community
they
around that was evacuated, and it's
right.
crazy looking if you've ever seen pictures. Because, I mean, like, people left their friggin' breakfast on the table. They got the
Yeah.
hell out. I mean,
Yep.
like, it's not like it was slowly evacuated over the course of months. Like, there was the order in the direct areas around Chernobyl they were just like, get out, and like just people left their belongings in their homes. And so these homes are overgrown with vines and whatnot, but their books are still on the shelves, their record is
Yep.
still on the turntable. It's crazy looking.
Yeah. It was on the cheap. That's all I remember. It was like maybe $50 or something. I
You
was like,
go,
wow.
yeah, it's actually in Ukraine, Chernobyl.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to comedy. You mentioned that you're a joke writer, and I think you had talked to me about this before. Like you've written for some names, some people that are pretty well known. Yeah.
Well, I've done shows with some people that are pretty well known. I've sold a few jokes over the years, but we don't talk about that because that's the deal. When you sell a joke to
Gotcha.
somebody, you sell them the right to say it's their joke. But yeah, I've sold a few. I
Okay.
wish they
Yeah.
were. I wish it paid better, but it pays okay.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, because I know Paul Mooney was a big joke writer for a lot of people, like Eddie Murphy and I can't remember who else, but I don't know, and I don't know how that would have worked. Would people have known that he was a joke writer for him, or that just kind of like mentioned years later? Oh yeah, by the way, I wrote jokes
It
for
depends.
Eddie
It's some
Murphy and so
people.
so.
It's mentioned years later, and some people are wide open about it. Kevin Hart is very frank about the fact that he has writers that write for him. You know,
Yeah,
and some other comics, they will never fess up to the fact that they have writers working for them. But that's, it's a new world where, it used to be that a comic would take several years to come up with their new hour. But with Netflix and Hulu and the money being thrown at these comics, they've had to accelerate the process, to get their next Netflix special out, And the only way to write good material, like, I don't decide what's a good joke. They decide what's a good joke. My
right.
favorite jokes are in the trash can because nobody thought they were funny but me. And there's no point in telling a joke nobody thinks is funny. And it's jokes that were just one-off quips that I thought was, this is so dumb. They got such good laughs that they made it into the special, So the only way to write an hour of material is to write and write and write and get on the road and get out and perform. And if
Practice.
a joke works every single night, hey, I got it. It's done. That joke's written. Move on to another ones. And in order to do that, particularly to get a full hour of really quality stuff, it takes years. It takes a year,
Yeah.
2 years. So the fact that it's been accelerated by the platforms that say, hey, you made us a lot of money a year ago.
Make us some more.
Make us some more. Let's do it again. And people go, I can't say no to the money, but I also can't give you, I can't go out and spend 1,000 hours doing this and be ready for you in 3 months to tape this thing. So I have no choice but to hire writers. So it happens, but I hold, it's not a mark against a comic that they would use writers. I mean,
Yeah, well, because ultimately it's all about the delivery anyway. I mean, you might have the same joke and somebody tells it and, it doesn't have the same like syncopation or inflections. And when they do it and it just doesn't land, then you have somebody else do the same joke and it does land.
absolutely. I mean, all the biggest late night hosts, nobody thinks that they write their material, but they're respected in the field of comedy, and it's a known fact that they have a whole team of writers. It's just a different
Yeah.
perception. But when you get on stage and you're like, I'm keeping it real, man. It's just me up here talking. it's part of the perception that these are the thoughts coming out of your head. It's the whole thing's, it's sort of an illusion. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to, like at its best, you're convincing people that I'm just thinking this stuff right now, like a show becomes a lot less funny when it seems rehearsed, when it seems like they're just reading lines, which is why,
Yeah.
they say if something happens in the room, you have to identify it because it takes everybody out of it. If you just keep going, if the waitress drops a glass and it smashes and you just keep going with your jokes, everyone goes, oh, it's just rehearsed, written like material. Like you have to be present in the room with them, which is why crowd works so well, because hey, we're just hanging out talking. And in the case of crowd work, you kind of are just hanging out talking. Now, a seasoned comic has 1,000 good quips in their pocket. When they say, where are you from? Or what do you do for a living? They've probably got something already on tap, ready to go for when you say, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a whatever, but it creates the illusion that we're just hanging out talking and this is just between us, and that makes it so much funnier.
So how do you feel, we were mentioning about, the kind of upswing of comedy. How do you feel about, the kind of like the TikTok sensations, like your Matt Rife and whatnot? And I know that like during COVID lockdown, our mutual friend Joe Bando was mentioning that some people had been performing for like 6 weeks, and then they're like, "Where's my Netflix special?" Like how do you kind of feel about that?
I mean, hey, go get it. It is a brave new world in a way out there. And if that's the medium that you chose and that you blew up in and you're successful and you have fans, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like comedy's for the people that go to see comedy, which is why I always say like nothing makes me crazier than somebody being offended by a comedian telling a joke at a show they didn't go to. Like a comedian you didn't like tells a joke at a show you didn't go to and you're offended. Fuck you to hell. You have no right to be offended. That joke was for their fans in that room on that night. Who fucking cares? You don't like that comic anyway, so who cares that you're offended by what they said? If the people in the room are laughing, then they did their job. I don't care how offensive it is to you. It could be offensive to me, but I'm not going to hold a grudge. I wasn't there. The joke wasn't for me. If a Trump supporter comic gets up and does a bunch of jokes about how stupid liberals are or something like that, I am a liberal. Maybe I would say, oh, screw you, buddy. But if everyone in the room is laughing, I'd also go applause to you, buddy. You cracked up your audience. You did your job. Your job was to crack these people up and they enjoyed you. So well done. How weird would it be if somebody every record that ever, like people say you like music, right? You're a musician, you like music. Not really. I like some music. How fucking weird would it be if I liked all music? You play me anything, I'm like, I love it. We're snobs. We like a little of this and a little of that. We don't like all movies, we don't like all records, we don't like all bands, and we don't like all comedians.
Well, I remember Chris Rock used to tell so many white people jokes, and like anybody could easily be offended by it. I thought they were fucking hilarious. I was on the floor like rolling, because like there's truth in a lot of like comedy, like there has to be, and so when he's making these analogies, and when he's kind of like kind of breaking it down and telling it like it is, it's funny. You're like, oh yeah, that's true. That is kind of like what white people do. That's pretty funny.
I mean, that is one of the keys to comedy right there, is speak a truth. Say something true and people will laugh at it even despite themselves. In fact, that might be the greatest thrill as a comedian, is to get somebody to laugh at something despite themselves, to get the person to laugh and they go, oh, I didn't just laugh at that, did I? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And it's okay.
Have you ever dealt with hecklers before, and how did you handle it?
Well, of course I have many times, and it's one of the first times I ever truly bombed. I mean, horribly bombed to the point where I felt a hole being burned in the back of my head, like shame. I couldn't tell if shame was boring through my skull into my brain, or shame was trying to escape my skull and get out, but something was burning a hole in my head. But I was hired by the Improv to do one of their satellite clubs, which happened to be at a casino in Vegas, not Vegas, Tahoe. And they sent me there for a week to do a week's worth of shows. First
Oh, wow.
ever big break I ever had in the comedy business, man. But the thing was, this was also one of my first big bookings. So I wasn't doing a lot of clubs at the time in front of normal people. So all I was performing for was open mic comics in LA. And anyone will tell you, you could tell me right now, these are degenerates mostly, you know? And in addition to being degenerates, they sit and listen to comedy all day, every day. So they're numb to it. So the only thing that makes them laugh are the worst, most horrible things you could possibly say, which is why, you know, open mic comedy has diminishing returns once you start doing club dates, because open mic comics laugh at different things than regular people. Well, I didn't know that at the time. So I had to get an act up and running for this big opportunity I had. And I was warming it up on open mic comics, saying terrible, horrible things that they thought was funny, that the average person would say, my God, man, that's a terrible thing to say. So night one, I go, I get to the casino. They send me to my room. They give me my room key, and they give me this a letter that I can take to any restaurant in the casino and get free food. I'm like, that's amazing.
Nice.
And I go up to the room, and it's a suite. It's a couple of rooms. It's not a room. It's several rooms. You know, I'm like,
Wow.
oh my God, this is the most amazing experience of my life. And I said, I'm going to do not, I didn't just want to crush. I was enjoying it so much that first day when I got there. I was like, my goal this week is to get asked back to come do this again. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to live in casinos and spend weeks on end. So that night, showtime, I went down an hour early because I was going to dazzle everybody. So I went down, I introduced myself to the door guy, the woman taking the tickets. I went into the manager's office and introduced myself to him. I wanted to make sure everybody knew I'm here. I'm here to work. I'm here to have a good time, and I'm here to have good shows. And they all seemed so cool. And then I go backstage. I meet the other comics. It's a couple minutes before showtime. There's a curtain in front of the stage, and a waitress comes back and says to me, "Hey, I know it's your first time here. I just thought you'd like to know it's a full house. Your first show
Ooh.
is a full house." I said, "Oh my God, amazing. This is going to be amazing." Curtain goes up. At the time, by the way, if you could see me now, I'm kind of a long hair hippie. I don't exactly have short hair, but I was a long haired rock and roll hippie at the time. And this is like, I think 2017, 2018, maybe. And I look out at the crowd, and there are MAGA hats everywhere. And I'd never performed for that crowd before. And I'm
Oh.
like, okay, let's see how this goes. And I walk on stage, and within let's say a minute, I realized I'm bombing. And then I look down, like after another minute, my hand is shaking, which it had never done before. I'm literally shaking
Oh.
to not just groans, but people starting to yell, "Get off the stage," like "fuck you" or whatever. I mean, they're horribly offended by me, and they're offended also by what I look like. I look like the elitist liberal or whatever that they hate anyway. And there's a clock on the stage counting down, and I'm supposed to do 15 minutes.
Whoa.
I feel like I've been out there 4 hours at this point.
Yeah.
And I look at the clock. I've got like 12 minutes to go.
Oh,
I've been out there
no.
3 freaking minutes.
Oh,
At this
no.
point, I've lost my place, and I don't really know where I'm trying to recover. Like, and when you don't even remember any jokes, like I can't remember a single joke. It's not even like I could do the set out of order. It's not like I forgot the order. I forgot my set. I can't do anything. I am
Dude.
frozen on stage. And I get off stage, and the manager, who was so nice to me when I went and introduced myself to him in his office, is waiting for me backstage when I get backstage.
Oh, no.
And in front of the other comics, he goes, "Come here. Come here." And he takes me into like this, whatever, service area behind the stage, between the bar and the stage. And he fucking chews me out loudly. And he's saying, like he's telling me, he's like, those people aren't even comedy fans, most of them. Those are high rollers. We give out free tickets at the casino to the comedy show to people that are like high rollers or people that won a lot. And he goes, and you're doing this street shit, or whatever. He kept saying these street jokes or whatever. He kept saying like, or dirty jokes or this filth. Like these people, like, I don't even remember how filthy it really was, to be honest with you, because I'm not that dirty of a comic. And he said to me, if we hadn't signed a contract with you to keep you here for the whole week, I'd be sending you home right now. But you have until tomorrow to come up with another set, to turn it around, man.
Whoa.
So after the show, I go back to my room, which was so sweet before the show. And now it was like bitter. It was like, I don't deserve this room. I should be here. This is not for me. This is for real comedians. And I just pulled out my phone, and like all comics, I've recorded every set I've ever done, every open mic I've ever done. And I reinvented myself for a week. I was like, what home style, middle America image can I present? And I wrote an entire different 15 minutes. I mean, there were probably a few things that kind of worked if I just calmed down and, delivered them properly. But I basically rewrote my entire set. And then I went to to backstage the next night, and the other comics were there. And one of them was a seasoned pro. And he said, hey, can I tell you something? And I said, sure. And he said, I heard everything he said to you last night. Everyone did. That's embarrassing, but okay. It's like, we all heard what he was yelling at you last night. And he goes, but what you need to know is they didn't like you, the person, when you walked on stage. You look like a liberal elitist that they hate, like some hippie, some rock and roll guy, And he goes, you need to slay that dragon before you can tell a single joke. You need to tell them you see yourself the way they see you. You need to let them know that we're all on the same page. I know what I look like, which is why comics do the I look like bit. They walk on. The minute you walk on stage, most comics will say, I look like, so that we're all on the same page. I know I'm a fat slob. I know I'm whatever. I know I'm ugly. I know I'm, whatever. You can't walk on stage with a crutch and, with a broken leg and not mention it. You have to do that. So he's like, so right now, before you walk on stage, you need to come up with 3 quick things you could say. And I was like, okay. He's like, I know what I look like. And I was like, okay, I know what I look like. I could sum it up in 2 words: parental disappointment. He's like, good. Yes. You look like if you were their child, you'd be a disappointment, I was like, I look like a Bernie bro or whatever, And so I just came up with a few things, and I walked on stage and I said, I know what I look like. I can sum it up in 2 words: parental disappointment. They all laugh because that's what I look like to them. I look like parental disappointment. And you'd be disappointed if I was your kid and I grew up to look like this, I brought up that I was like a Bernie bro. I brought up, a few things like that. And then I went into a whole new set, and it went okay. It didn't go great, but it went okay. Second night. So then I went back to my room that night, having recorded the set, and everything that worked, I put on in one column. Everything that didn't got thrown out. And I went through the phone and I looked. So now I had 8 minutes that worked, and 7 minutes that didn't. So now I go through and I find 7 more minutes. Next night I go out, same thing. I make fun of myself. Everybody laughs. I do the jokes. This time, 11 minutes of it worked. And so now I just needed 4 more minutes. And I went back to my room and I found 4, and I wrote a few things, and I found some much tamer jokes. And the next night I go out on stage and I fucking crushed. It wasn't really me. I wouldn't do that set today. I wouldn't do that set for anybody, but you know what? They didn't hire me to be me. They hired me to entertain their audience. And that's okay that it wasn't really me on stage. It was this version of me that makes middle America, mom and dad, MAGA hat wearing people laugh. And then the next night I crushed again. And then the final night, we did 2 shows that night. And I went backstage, and the manager who had yelled at me was backstage, and he said, I need to tell you something. I said, what? He goes, I never do this, but I invited a few friends of mine to the show because I've never seen somebody turn it around as well as you. And I told my
Wow.
friends, you have to come see this guy. He bombed so bad night one, and now he's crushing. And he goes, so crush tonight. My friends are here. Don't embarrass me. You
Oh
have to
God.
crush. I'm like, thanks for the pressure. But
Yeah, right.
I did it. I did 2 shows. They both went great. I got off stage after the second show that night. He was backstage again, and he said, we're bringing you back.
Wow.
They rebooked me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. So, like, when you went back, like, did you kind of, and I mean, that's a great story, by the way, because it that like shows that you can have like redemption arcs in your, your career, your life. And, you
Yeah.
kind of, you took what, could have been a bad situation and made it great, and then like, when you went back the second time, like what was the response? Were you crushing those nights too?
Everything had changed. I mean, that was probably 8 months later, and I knew what to expect. And I was also getting booked at that point in regular clubs in front of regular people. So I wasn't just performing for these degenerate open micers that are my friends to this day, you know. So I had learned what makes normal people on a Friday night that worked all week, that are out with their girlfriend or their boyfriend and having drinks and just looking to enjoy a Friday night at a comedy club. I had learned what they liked and what cracked them up. And to be honest with you, it was much closer to who I was anyway. And the only reason I was telling jokes that were a little bit more, vulgar or whatever it was because all I did was perform at open mics, and everybody wants laughs. And that's what makes these fucking people laugh, is if I come on
There you
stage
go.
and I say, I want to have sex with a corpse or whatever it is, the most horrible thing you can say, and they'll laugh at that, and it turns out that me just being much closer to the real me, the me that hangs out with my friends in a bar and tells a story and my friends laugh and we all enjoy each other's company. It was much closer to that when you get in front of a real club, in front of real people.
So would it be safe to say that, it would be helpful for a comedian to kind of research the club and like kind of look into like the demographics of the area and like, okay, well, like say I'm going to go perform in like a quote unquote red state or something like
Yep.
that. Tailor your material appropriately and things like that.
Yeah, if you're a nobody like me, then you have to. And I would also say, sit in the goddamn room. Watch the show, watch the comics before you for a number of reasons. A, you can gauge the audience. And also, that 3 comics now have already asked that guy in the front row what that crazy shirt he's wearing is. We know, everybody knows it's going to be boring for them if you come out and start crowd working the same people for the same reasons. But also you could be in on the inside joke and the audience thinks that's really funny. If you weren't in, 2 comics before, there was a banter between the comic and some guy in the audience, and then you come on stage and you do a callback to that, you point at the guy and you call it out, everyone's going to laugh even harder. Be in the room.
Right.
But yeah, I was just on a show the other night with a comic who was touring, and he was telling me about his Florida set versus his San Francisco set. But if you reach the point where you're huge name comic, then you don't have to do that anymore because your audience finds you. But as long as it's you finding the audience, then you have to come to them. You have to tailor it. And who the fuck wants to give somebody a bad time? I could easily walk on stage in San Francisco and have a great set making fun of Donald Trump and Christians or God knows what, and everyone would laugh. And if I took that to a small town in Texas and I gave everyone a horrible experience, I could say, that's me, bro. They got the real me. Well, the real me actually is a clown who wants to entertain people. So I would far rather meet them where they are and have a good time with them. And everybody's great. There's no such thing as bad people or bad Americans. Like, we could disagree about anything and we could even fight about it. But the fact of the matter is, when it gets right down to it, we're all like,
we all have the same needs and
we all have the same needs and we all find the same things funny, more or less, and if I have so many Trump supporters in my family, I have Trump supporters who are friends, you and I talked about this when you were on my podcast, that I like people who, are different anyway. So the Trump supporter comics on the LA scene, I gravitate to and I'm friends with because I know what they're doing is harder. and I respect
Right.
them for it. Everyone else is booing at them. Oh, you stupid Republican or whatnot. I'm like, he's braver than you. Do you know what's not brave? Getting on stage and making fun of him, or getting on stage and saying, whatever, some liberal talking point and having everyone applaud. So
Right.
I get along with everybody, and all my Trump supporters in my family and my Trump supporter friends and whatnot. We get along swimmingly. And when
That's
we do
great.
talk about the things that we disagree about, we do it in a playful, friendly way. I don't want to
Sure.
keep, I don't want to fight with anybody. Certainly not not an audience that paid to come to a
Yeah.
comedy club and then I gave you a shitty time. No dice. You paid to come to
Yeah.
a comedy club and I'm on the bill. I am here to give you a great time.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. That's a great attitude.
Yeah.
I have kind of the inverse experience in that, like, I actually went on like accompanying some of my friends on a tour. I wasn't performing. I was just kind of tagging along, and there were a few dates that were not filled. And so last minute, like my buddy's scrambling to figure out, well, where's a venue that will, pick us up for a night. And it was at a really like fancy, almost like yacht club. It was on the water, and it was like we were looking at, like, we felt so out of place there already. We're in like, just scrubby shit, and like, we'd been in a car for like a few days. And one of the guys that was on the tour had the most offensive shit. He had a song called Goat Sex, and it's exactly what you would think it would be about. And we were like, dude, how is Craig going to do this here? We're like, he is not, like, they're going to hate him. He had the crowd in stitches. They were hysterical. They loved it. They were and we were like, our minds were blown. We're like, how the hell did that just happen? Like, completely floored, completely floored. Um let's see here. Mike Capone says hello. Is this someone you know?
Capone? No, unless he's Al
Oh.
Capone's great grandson.
Well, hi Mike. How are you doing? Thanks for joining. Um what do you do, like, who are some comics that you take inspiration from, like older comics?
I do love Mitch Hedberg a lot.
Yeah.
He was an early influence for me. Steve Martin is absolutely huge. I mean, again, just the silliness. Lenny Bruce is interesting in that it's like he does dated material. Like he'll talk about, like, he does bits and characters about some actor that has been forgotten by history and whatnot. And I can listen to it all day. He is so engaging and interesting that even when I can't follow necessarily what he's talking about, I still love it, man. He's like, he literally, um, there's a famous recording of him. I think it's at UCal Berkeley, where he just gets on stage and reads the federal indictment against him. He just
I think
goes
I've
through
heard
it.
that before. Yeah.
He's just going through the federal indictment against. He's reading a federal indictment against him, and it's not. It doesn't even matter if it's funny or not. It's engaging. It's like you can't turn it off.
Yeah.
There's something about him that like really tickles me, man. I like Lenny Bruce a lot. Like I look up to him. Obviously, he fought for freedom of speech in ways that no comic today has to fight for freedom of speech. I mean, he literally was going to jail.
Going to
You know,
jail, yeah.
yeah. Back in his day, they had what was called a performer's license, and you had to get a license to perform. And if you used profanity or whatnot, you get strikes against your license, and then they could take it away, and then you couldn't legally perform anymore. And the cops were sending undercover cops in to watch his sets to see what he was saying. The feds did the same, and he took it all the way to the freaking Supreme Court and won. And the reason that there's no such thing as a performer's license anymore, and that you can
It's because
say anything you want on that stage, is because of him. I mean, he's a hero. So, I mean, I admire him, but I also find he is hilarious. His bits are super funny. I mean, and he did it all back in the day. I mean, people think of him as being something of a beatnik and whatnot, but if you watch him on like Steve Allen and things like that, he did poetry. He sang songs. I didn't even know that about him. When I listened to the Lenny Bruce records, there's not a lot of songs on them, but if you watch his early television performances, he would sing. He would do a song. He would do a poem. He would do a bit. And he really did bits. I mean, like in a way that not a lot of people do them anymore. He would say, like, So let me take you there. It's late night on a Saturday. So and so enters the room, and he would do the voice, and he would act it out as if he was doing like a table read or something. Like he's reading, he's like doing a script. He's playing all the characters, you know. And there are people that do stuff similar, but not quite the same as he was doing. I mean, he was a jack of all trades.
Yeah, I mean, he was an innovator, man. You ever watch Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
Of course, the
Yeah.
superhero show. That's what I call it. I say it's the stand-up comedy superhero. Like she's got these her superpower is she doesn't bomb, and she's instantly funny without trying, and she's got a polished set without trying. She's the Spider-Man of Superman of stand-up
Yeah.
comedy, but it's great. And the actress who
Yeah.
plays her is fantastic, and all the characters and actors are phenomenal. Yeah. And I know Lenny
Yeah.
Bruce is a character on the show as well.
Is in the show. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I was wondering. Which that brings me to my next question. Like, what are you watching as far as like media? Like, and you know, are you a reader? What do you read? And since we'll go back to the music, what do you like? What do you listen to lately?
Well, you know, I am an old man now, so it does get harder for me to expose myself to new music. But at the same time, you know, if this is just maybe me being a complete and total snob, but you know, rock and roll is getting old, so it's all been done in a lot of ways. You know, there's not the innovation is more difficult within the standard rock and roll sets. You know, I mean, with guitar, drums, bass, singers. You know, to innovate and to do something totally different is a little harder. And it's not to say that there aren't great bands out there. You know, I used to always say, you know, to my bandmates, like they were so into the Beatles, I'd be like, they'd be like, I want to be like the Beatles. I was like, me too, which is why we should sound nothing like the Beatles, because the Beatles were innovating. They were pushing the envelope. If you want to be like the Beatles, don't sound like the Beatles. The Beatles weren't trying to sound like a band from 30 years earlier. You know, they were trying to sound like nothing anyone had ever heard before. They were experimenting with backwards tracks and adding an orchestra and you name it. I mean, they were truly innovative. So I like innovation. I like doing innovative music. So when it comes to like rock, I'm not hearing stuff that's so innovative. That's not to say that there isn't great people making great music. It's just it's harder to be cutting edge with an art form that's been around and so much has been done with it. But what I really get off on is TikTok videos and Instagram videos of players, 60 seconds videos of, I mean, kids are so great. It's amazing because I thought they were going to be terrible. I truly did. I was like, they have no attention span. The internet has sucked up their attention span, but it's just the opposite. What they have is endless guitar lessons, endless bass lessons, endless drum session lessons on YouTube, you name it. The greatest teachers in the world. I used to have to wait a week for my guitar teacher to come over and teach me 3 new tricks. They can all night watch the YouTube videos of how do you do this with your fingers and how do you
makes me so jealous, man.
Yeah, and what you end up with is players that are in the playing is innovative and their style, and I mean they are freaking monsters. We're talking about 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds that can play in ways that I didn't even know you could play. Skill level, they're phenomenal. They're so great. And I love it. And I can watch for 30 seconds or 60 seconds. You know, they don't play a whole song. They just show you themselves shredding or doing something. And I love it because you can watch their fingers and how do they do that? And I've been practicing guitar for 35 years. I have no idea how this 22-year-old is doing that, but they're so damn good. And I have noticed that, interestingly enough, when it comes to the drummers, because I love drummers, I love the drummers, and that for whatever reason, the young dudes, and there's so many great ones out there. They're so technical, but I feel like growing up in the world of Beat Detective and Pro Tools and whatnot, that they've become so, you know, stringent in their time and whatnot. But the gals, this batch of young women drummers, they've got the feel, man. For whatever reason, the dudes they have prowess like you wouldn't believe. They can play their fucking ass off, but it's so stringent. They're so metronome-ish. Yeah. But these young lady drummers that I'm seeing, these in their early 20s, late teens and whatnot, man, they've got the groove. They can play in ways that, you know, growing up, there weren't a lot of women drummers in the rock scene. And there's so many now. Yeah, sure. Sheila E. Or, I mean, there was a bunch of them, but you know, nowadays there's so many, and they are freaking groove monsters. They've got
Yeah.
feel. The gals got feel on the drums. So that's mostly what I do when it comes to music is I watch young people shredding the shit out of their instruments on TikTok.
I love watching, I mean, she's not a newer artist, but I love watching old Karen Carpenter videos.
Oh,
That
yeah.
shit's so amazing to me.
Oh, yeah.
There's a girl that plays, I don't know if you're familiar with the band Meshuggah, but she'll play Meshuggah songs in heels
Yeah.
on the drums. I'm like, what this is already hard enough to play as it is, and you're playing with like the most uncomfortable, most impractical shoes on the face of the planet. Like, what?
Yeah, I think
Oh,
I've probably seen her, but there's a bunch of people on TikTok doing stuff like that. But yeah, shredders. But then again, there's some drummer dude. I can't think of his name now. Uh I think he's Spanish or something like that. He's beyond a monster. Long beard. You know this dude I'm talking about? I mean, he can tear up the drums. And he could play with one hand. He'll play like an entire Foo Fighters song, 16th notes and all, with one hand while
haven't seen
drinking
him.
a cup of coffee, which is kind of a novelty act. It's like if you were in the recording studio and, so the guy's drinking a cup of coffee while playing drums, I'd be like, how about both hands? How about like, it is something of a novelty act, but it's fun to watch.
Sure.
But yeah, Karen Carpenter, I mean, she was a monster.
Fucking insane.
Singing and playing drums. She does what was it? Dancing in the Streets, I think, was a famous thing she did on the
Yeah.
Smothers Brothers. And
Yeah.
she's singing and she's cute as a button, all dolled up, and she's got the jazz chops. I mean, she's her favorite. Yeah, somebody
Uh,
just
Jorge Garrido.
yeah. Oh, dude, that
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, he's a monster. That guy can play. Forget about it.
Okay.
I love it. Yeah,
Check him
mind
out.
bending. The musicianship coming from the younger generation is mind bending, and
Yeah.
you know it depends on how you use it. I mean, tapping, which was an Eddie Van Halen thing back in my day, all the kids can do it nowadays. And they do it in a much more melodic way. Not that there's anything wrong with the way Eddie did it, but they're incorporating chordal structures with melody that they're using their fingers to tap into. But the bass players are doing that too. What's this guy's name? Charles Berthold. uh
Don't know him.
he's a monster, but man, he plays bass in a way like I've not really heard before, where he's got the chords and the melody all going at the same time on bass. I love it. I love musicianship, and I love watching great musicians. So yeah, super
What are you
exciting.
watching as far as like, I mean, are you a movie? Are you a TV guy?
I love movies. I'm a huge movie guy. I'm a huge TV guy. Right now, because I took an acting class, because I'm not ever going to be done scratching that creative itch. And even though I realize that this is another pursuit that takes decades to hone, I could either just say, "Oh, I'm too old. Why bother?" Or I could say, "Okay, but maybe in a decade I'll have some skills, and won't I be glad I started now?" So I took an acting class, and it gave me an appreciation for the art form in a way that I didn't have really before. And for whatever reason, I was like, I want to just analyze great actors, and I want to do it with a show that I've seen a bunch of times before, something that I've seen a bunch of times before, where I'm not distracted by the storyline, where I can watch the acting. So I went with The Sopranos, and it's blowing my
Oh,
freaking mind.
it's amazing.
It's like I knew it was great acting when I watched it as a musician and a comedian or whatever I was 10 years ago last time I watched it. But
Yeah.
as somebody who's now got a modicum of understanding of what acting is, James Gandolfini, forget about it. I mean, he's beyond fucking amazing. And I know that his process was a rather intensive one from what I understand. But all of them, Michael Imperioli, I mean, all of them, Edie Falco, I mean, these people. And, the reason that I knew the show was great, but the reason that my mind wasn't blown with the acting the first time I watched it was because I didn't realize they were acting. I thought I was
Oh, it's
watching
so
a real
natural.
family. I just,
Yeah.
the actors disappear and the characters come to life. I like to say
Yeah.
that I've watched every episode of Sopranos in the last 3 months, and I didn't see James Gandolfini once. I just saw
Yeah.
Tony Soprano.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it may be the best television show. Like,
I mean,
it's a bold statement, but I can stand by that, I think.
yeah. I mean, I that's how I'm feeling right about now. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
know that there's a
It's
million and one
incredible.
good shows. I have a friend that's on my case to get on board with what is it, Severance? What is it, the one about where you go to work and then they erase your memory?
I don't know that one.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
huge show. The
Okay.
second season just came out. Anyway, everyone's saying to look out for that I should check that out, that's as good as it gets.
Mike says, "Who is the best director, and why is it Tarantino?" It's not. Though he's
Why?
really good. His
Yeah.
early catalog.
Let me tell you something, Mike. Again, this is for the same reason that these young people are such great musicians, is that they have these great teachers on YouTube and all these channels where they can just endlessly somebody like myself who's developing an appreciation for cinema can also watch these breakdowns. And I watched several breakdowns of some Tarantino scenes recently where the subtext was lost on me the first time I watched it, uh, and yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I was watching a breakdown of the scene in Jesus, Inglorious Bastards, where they go into the pub in Germany and it
That's a
turns into
great
a
scene.
firefight or whatnot, and somebody was breaking down the creative decisions and the subtext and the foretelling that was going on in the scene that I wouldn't have picked up on, or maybe I would have with a couple more watches or something like that, where my mind was just blown. I was like, holy shit, this Tarantino motherfucker, I think he's got a bright future. This is very good.
Yeah. I mean, I especially love his early catalog, and yeah, that is a great scene. Acting in that scene is phenomenal too. It just comes off really naturalistic, and yeah, he's a good director. I wouldn't say he's the best, but
Yeah.
I do
I
really
just did
enjoy
Taxi
Tarantino a lot.
Driver the other night, and
Oh,
it was blowing my mind, man.
incredible! Probably
Just
one of my favorites.
blowing my mind. And I don't know
Yeah.
how. I haven't seen it in about 10 years. I don't know how it got by me that was Albert Brooks.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I mean, I'm sure I did 10 years ago, but when I think Taxi Driver, I do think Sybil Shepherd, I think Robert De Niro. But yeah, Albert Brooks, I mean, he was such a talent that, I mean, it was a dramatic role. There's nothing funny
Yeah.
about his character whatsoever, but he knocks that out of the park as well. But yeah, no, forget about it was Taxi Driver. I mean, forget about it. Sorry for the
Forget about
cliche,
it.
but
Well, you do have an Italian last name,
I
so
do, so I can get away with it. But it was Scorsese as well, though. I mean, the genius that you're not watching on the screen, but you are watching on the screen because you're watching his vision and his work and just the shots that he does. And I'm trying so much harder than I've ever tried before to understand what is being shown to me in cinema, that is not on the surface but the subtext. And I was noticing a shot that Scorsese was using over and over again, which is out the back window of the taxi as it drives away. He keeps using that over and over again, where you watch this thing disappear into a little dot in the distance, as the taxi drives away. And just these cinematic tools that they use to send messages, which I appreciated these movies, is great. So I understand that on some level my brain was processing and understanding the messages that were being sent to me, but the ability to articulate what I like about what I'm seeing is a gift. I used to say
sure.
when I would hang out with my film friends, that I felt like they had ruined movies for themselves because they would analyze it. I was like, I just watch movies and enjoy them. You guys are looking at what? The lighting? Get out of here, man. That sounds
Yeah.
boring. You're ruining the movie. But at the same time, when I listen to a Beatles record, I'm like, that's a Gibson amplifier through an Epiphone guitar. Like, they're like, you're ruining it, breaking down the music. Just listen to it and enjoy it. But when you peel away those layers and you get that extra appreciation. Speaking of Tarantino,
Yeah, Shutter Island was a good one.
oh,
He's yeah.
fantastic. But speaking of Tarantino, though, I did watch True Romance, which he did not direct, obviously, but he
Oh,
wrote. And I watched it because somebody on Threads said, like, who has the best "well, I'm fucking dead anyway" scene,
I know the exact scene you're talking about, and I
And
just
so,
watched
and
it probably about a
everybody
week
said
ago.
Dennis Hopper with the,
Yeah.
and so I was like, you know what, as somebody who's trying to appreciate, acting, let's go and watch that film. And the whole thing's fantastic. James Gandolfini, by the way, practically playing Tony Soprano in that
Yeah.
movie. But holy cow, I mean, Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken, I hate to use the cliche, but masterclass. It's a masterclass.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic, and I almost feel like, it'd be, because I know he did this for a handful of films, but it would have been interesting to see Tarantino, his writing in the hands of other directors, because I really like Tony Scott's style, and I don't want to say it's better, but it almost is, like, does that make sense?
Sure, it makes sense. I mean, again, I am somebody who's just getting into this. I'm trying to expand my horizons and understand cinema from a deeper perspective. So I don't know that I could speak educatedly about who the best director is or what stylistically is my favorite style just yet. I'm trying to watch films with new eyes right now and just appreciate them in a way that I was unable to appreciate them when I was just some guitar playing guy that went to the movies occasionally and liked them, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it takes me a few watches too, because I definitely do try to watch the movie for enjoyment the first time around. And then if I really appreciate the enjoyment factor of it, I'll go back and watch it again. And like, I was just talking to one of my friends about, the last scene in Return of the Jedi with, the Emperor and Vader and stuff. And there's so much going on there. There's so much going on. And like, just like, when there's nothing being said, there's so much subtext and there's so much like, you fucking go for that weapon and I'm gonna fuck you up. Like you just see
Yep.
it, he doesn't even have to say anything. He's just like, he's just waiting there, and like, the fact that Vader ultimately what saves him is empathy.
Yeah.
Like he's able to have empathy for his son who is suffering at the hands of this guy who has just manipulated him and just fucking like destroyed everything good that he has and just made him enact all these horrible atrocities. And he's like, no, I'm done with it. And just loves his son.
Yeah.
It's really that crazy.
Yeah. It's in a message about redemption, the deathbed conversion almost,
Yeah.
where those were Darth Vader's, those were Anakin Skywalker's last moments amongst the living. And he went out like a champ. He used
Yeah.
them well.
Yeah, definitely. What's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh man, I mean, I've thought about that many times, many times before. Um, you know, I hate to say it, but don't be comfortable. I mean, comfort is the enemy. Because you can get a comfy coffin and sleep in it for the rest of your life, but comfort has slowed me down my entire life. I've
Yeah.
found myself in situations where I had a band that was doing pretty well and I didn't have to work that hard anymore. So I didn't,
Yeah.
whatever it was, like, be uncomfortable. Having a lifestyle that you're not happy with and wanting to better yourself is a motivator. And I've allowed myself to be comfortable for decades. And as a result, I watched the people that were in a tough spot force themselves to better their lives, and watched them make dreams come true. Whereas it's not a dream that I'm living, but it's comfortable enough and it's okay. And I can go to the bar 5 nights a week and there's a little bit of money in my pocket or whatever. And it turned out it was a disaster. I wish I was the starving artist the entire time, striving, willing to do anything to get ahead, instead of some, I hate to say it, but cool guy whose band was kind of hip and we signed a little record deal and we got to tour and things were going okay. Okay is not okay. Be miserable and strive for amazing. That's what I wish I had done,
You
I
still
think
can.
comfort and
I still can.
complacency have been my enemy.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with that one. I I'm definitely kind of in that spot right now. I definitely feel like I could make some improvements in my life and do things a little bit differently. But there's always tomorrow, typically.
Let's
So
hope so. Until there's
yeah,
not.
yeah, absolutely.
Because someday there won't be tomorrow.
Yes,
And
very
as
true.
they say, and this is not, this is not a Michael Regilio original, but at the end of the day, it's the things you didn't do that you regret.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Well, you've got the Dogma Debate podcast on most podcasting platforms.
Yes, sir.
Where else can we find you at?
Well, I do TikTok, I do Instagram, but not really. I do the TikTok, because you have to, as a comedian, put out content and whatnot. Um, I have a YouTube channel. Again, I don't take particularly good care of it, but I was lucky enough, like I said, I signed a production deal this year with a very reputable big name producer who's produced some of the biggest comedy specials that have come out in the last 10 years. And let's hope that we hit our marks and it makes an impact, and I get to just start living the touring comedian lifestyle that I want to live in the next couple of years of my life.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'm pulling for you because I love success stories and I love to see people, do kind of get out of if they're in a funk or they are striving to do better. I love to see them ascend to that next plateau. So
Yeah.
absolutely, I hope all the best for you, man.
Thank you.
Well, dude, I want to thank you for joining the show. It's been fantastic. I always love hearing those stories about like you told the story in the middle about bombing and then ultimately coming back. I think that's great. I think
Yeah.
that's fantastic. But uh, all right, everybody. I want to thank you again for joining the show. As you can see there at the bottom, I have an official merchandising company, hellsartco.bigcartel.com. Use code 20 for 20% off your entire order. I'll go ahead and throw up some little samples here. You might like this one. We got Bullet, Steve McQueen. You might like this one too. We got the Black Flag mock right there. We've got Psycho 2 with Mr. Norman Bates, Scream, Tatum Glow in the Dark, and we've got Randy from Scream 2, Glow in the Dark. And that's just a handful of samples. But if you go over to the website, you can see all the rest of the catalog we have. We have I'd say about 50 designs up there, but check them out. Bella Canvas, Tri-Blend. They're really soft. I think you'll love them. And if you're watching on here, please do me a favor and like, comment, share, subscribe. Click on that bell for notifications. And if you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow. That would be fantastic. Like I said, I finally got all the back catalog up there, which was pretty arduous, but it's done. I need to go and start doing on Apple Music or wherever, but everybody else listens to podcasts. I don't listen to podcasts typically. I usually watch videos on YouTube because I have YouTube Premium and it's ad free. But I'm starting to kind of hone in on the Spotify game a little bit more. But yeah, go over and listen to Michael's Dogma Debate. I got the name right this time. Dogma Debate podcast, and support him on all his social media platforms. And everybody, thank you so much for coming. Namaste. God bless. Be good. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Hell's Horn, life's a game.